Today we're going to talk about narrative design. Um, so here's the outline that we're going to talk about in our presentation. The first one is we need to know is what is the narrative design and when to use it and how it developed. And we also need to know how to identify the types of narrative research. And the third one is most important one. We need to know how to describe the key characters of narrative designs and understand the steps used in conducting narrative research and list criteria for evaluating a narrative study. Now we're talking about what is narrative research. So narrative research is focused on individual experiences. So narrative research is gathering data through the collection of stories, reporting individual experiences, and discussing the meaning of it. Actually, the narrative research can focus on more than one individual, but it has to be the individual and personal experiences. The second one we should know about the definition is it's a qualitative research. We use narrative research. We use narrative research when someone is willing to tell tell his or her personal experiences, and we are willing to report it. So it is to provide a voice to an individual who wants to be heard. And secondly, when stories are in a chronologic, what's that? Chronologic events. And then we should use the narrative research. Go. How narrative research developed. So narrative research are embrace all of the human sciences so that this form of research is not the province of any specific field of study. And narrative research emerged in 1990. So, and within the field of education, there are three factors that influence the development of narrative research. The first one is increased emphasis on teachers' reflection. Second one is more attention given to teachers and their knowledge. The third one is empowering teachers to talk about their experiences.
Now we're going to talk about the types of narrative research. There are 18 examples of types of narrative research. But for here, it's less important to know each type, but it's more important to recognize essential characters of the types.
Now there's a few questions that you need to answer to know those essential characters. The first one is who writes or record the stories. So if other people writes or record the story, it would be biography. And if the person who write and record the stories by him or herself, it would be autobiography. the second question is, how much of a life is recorded and presented? So if it's a lifelong story, it will be an entire experience. But if a personal life story, it can be single or multiple episodes of the person's experiences. So for this question, it is usually relevant to education topic. For example, if it's a teacher story, it will be personal accounts by teacher. But if it's children's stories, children will be the person who talk about the experiences. The next question we need to answer is theoretical lens being used? A theoretical lens in narrative research is a guiding perspective or ideology that provides structure for advocating for groups or individuals in the written reports. This lens may be to advocate for Latin American youth testimonies, reporting the stories of women using a feminist lens. Can narrative forms be combined? The answer is yes. For example, a narrative study may be biographical because researchers write and report about a participant in a study. This same study may focus on the personal study of a teacher. It may also address an events in the life of a teacher, such as a dismissal from a school, resulting in partial life story or personal narrative. In addition, if this individual is a woman, a researcher might be used a theoretical lens to examine power and control issues in the school. This could lead to a feminist narrative. The final resulting narrative thus could be a combination of different elements: a biography, a personal story, a teacher story, and a feminist perspective.
So now we're going to talk about the key characteristics of narrative design. There are many key characteristics of narrative design that consist of individual experiences, chronological of the experiences, collecting individual stories, restoring, coding for themes, context or setting, and collaborating with the participants. In the first key characteristics, individual experiences, the researcher often studies one individual and less frequently more than one. The researcher focuses on the personal, so what the individual experiences, and the social, so who the individual interacts with. John Dewey believed that the individual experience was a central lens for understanding the person. He also believed that in viewing the experience as a continuous, so meaning that one experience will lead up to the next and so on. Therefore, bringing us to the key characteristics of the chronicle of the experiences. Understanding the individual's past, present, and future experiences in a chronicle order is very important. Chronicle in narrative design means that researchers analyze and write about the individual's life using a time sequence or chronicle order of events. To develop the order of the events, the narrator asks the individual to tell a number of stories, which brings us to the next key characteristic, collecting individual stories. The researchers collect stories from the individuals or from the number of field texts. The field text represents the information from different sources collected by researchers in narrative designs. The stories collected are in first-person oral accounts. After the individuals tell their stories, researchers start the restoring process. The process is when the researchers gather stories and analyze them to place them in chronological order. The stories can also be placed into themes or categories. The reason for this is to provide further understanding of the individual experiences. Themes can be identified in a small number, such as 5 to 7 themes. The narrative researchers also look at the context or setting in great detail. The reason for this is so they can get a better understanding of the individuals and where their experiences took place. The last key characteristic is collaborating with the participants. This characteristic takes a lot of trust and time between the researcher and the participants in this study. Active involvement from the researcher and the participants eliminates differences in the story told and narrative reported. It also is formulation of central themes, deciding the type of stories to use and write about in the final research report. During narrative research, researchers have to ask themselves a variety of questions to avoid any ethical issues while gathering their stories. The first question that they need to ask is this story authentic? When relying heavily on self-reported information, there is a danger that the participants may fake the data. Therefore, to avoid the issue, researchers need to collect multiple field texts, create a triangulation of data, and need to member check. The second question that researchers have to ask themselves is this story the real story? Experiences may be too horrific to report or too raw to recall, such as victims of natural disasters. Participants may also fear reprisal or sanctions against them if they tell their story due to situations such as sexual harassment. However, although the story might not be the complete whole truth, researchers remember that stories are truths of our experiences, and any story has an element of truth in it. The next question that researchers need to ask themselves is who owns the story? Narrative researchers risk reporting stories that they do not have permission to tell, especially with individuals marginalized by society. Therefore, to avoid these issues, researchers need to obtain permission to report the stories, as well as informing the participants that the purpose and uses of these stories at the beginning of the project. Another question that researchers need to ask themselves is the participant's voice being lost in their final report. When restoring, it is possible for the report to reflect the researcher's story rather than the individual's story themselves. Therefore, researchers can avoid the issue by using extensive quotes from the participants and using precise language of the participants and carefully constructing the time and place of the story. The last story that they need to ask is, does this story have long-lasting negative implications on the participants? Participants may feel vulnerable to have their stories being told. Therefore, to avoid these issues, researchers may tell a composite story composed from multiple field text based on various experiences.
Now we are talking about the 7 steps in narrative research designs. So the first one is choosing a topic. It's often related to educational value. The second one is selecting individuals related to the topic to interview. And third is collect stories. Fourth is retell stories chronologically. The fifth is collaborate with participants. The sixth is write stories for research paper. And 7 is validate accuracy. Step 1, we should choose a topic first. We should choose a topic with educational value. How to choose a topic? Firstly, you should identify a phenomenon that you are worried about. You need to identify an issue or concern in the phenomenon. This issue or concern will be a topic. For example, if you are worried about the bullying situation, the bullying phenomenon in educational system, you may worry about the child who get bullied. You may worry about his or her feelings when they are suffering from others' aggressive behaviors. Within this concern, we may choose the negative effects to their personal social experience or social developments as our topic for the narrative design research. Step 2, we should select an appropriate individual for our research. This individual must be typical or is critical to our study. He or she must have experienced a specific issue or situation that related to our topic. For example, we just talked about the topic, negative social effects to children who get bullied. In this case, we may choose the child who is suffering from others' aggressive behaviors. In addition, researcher may also choose another child who get bullied from another class. Step 3, collect stories. We should collect stories from the individual. What we need to know in this step is there are many other methods to collect stories besides personal interview, such as read the individual's diary or letters after permission, assemble stories from his or her family members. So there's many ways to collect stories, not only the interview. Number 4, we tell the stories chronologically. Actually, we already talked about restoring when we talk about the major characters. To retell the individual stories, we should first examine the raw data and identify the elements. For example, the individual said, "I don't want to go home. I felt hopeless when I saw my bag was thrown by my classmates." We sequence those elements chronologically and present a retold story. Pretend a child named Mike. So, if we want to put the story in chronologic, we'll say Mike's classmates threw his bag, and then he felt hopeless, and finally, he did not want to go home. And that's what we need to do in this step. Step 5, collaborate with participants. This step is one that interacts with all the other steps in the process. Actually, it is a requirement in narrative research design. So it requires us to collaborate with the participant in each step. So we need to talk to him. We need to make sure what we write on the paper can capture his experience. Step 6. Write stories for research paper. When writing a story, researcher should include several features of narrative. Researchers with story certainly claims a central place in the narrative reports. In the final section, researcher may incorporate the literature and research studies about the problem. This is to help reader to know about narrative research, because usually readers are not familiar with the narrative research. So we can also highlight the importance of research, of narrative research in our paper. Step 7. Validates the accuracy of our narrative accounts. When collaboration exists with participants, this validation may occur throughout the project. There are several validation practices can be applied, such as member checking, researching from disconfirming evidence, and triangulating among data resource. Now we are going to talk about the sampling steps are not related to narrative design research. The first one is maximal variation. For narrative research design, we need to narrative our sampling, so this one is not relative. The second one is homogeneous sampling, and that is not count as well, because in homogeneous sampling, we need to find a group of person with the same characters. So we only need very few sampling in narrative. So this one is not relative. The third one, theory or concepts. In this sampling, we need to generate our idea, but actually in narrative design, narrative research design, we cannot generate our idea. It shows one perspective, so this one is not relative. After data collection, those two sampling methods are also not relative. For the first one, opportunistic sampling. This one needs to collect new information from our participants. But actually, in narrative research design, in the step that we collect data, we need to collect everything we want. So because we only have very few samples to collect, so we already need what we want. So we won't get new information. We already finished our interview, so it's already done. Now we are going to talk about relative samplings that to our narrative research design. The first part is before data collection. The first one is extreme case samplings. That's what we need in narrative research design. We need the special experience or stories, because many of these stories display some special or extreme characteristic. The second one is critical sampling. That one is related to our narrative research design as well, because critical samplings need an exceptional case, and researchers learn much about the phenomenon from it. So, and that's what we do. That's what we do in narrative research design. The third one is typical samplings. Typical samplings can also be used in narrative research design. Researcher may choose a typical individual to collect the story. It let those who are unfamiliar with the situation know about the situation. For example, if you need to study the educational system in poverty area, and then you may choose a principal of a school in there, and then we're going to talk about after data collection. So the snowball samplings is help us to locate a more appropriate individual and let us to collect a more useful experience that we need. So that one is relative to our narrative research design. Now we're going to show you a review video for narrative research design.